Let's talk for a moment about ongoing training, because I feel like as I talk to churches, this is a question that I get just about as much as any others when it comes to training volunteers. First of all, I would say that you want to always, always, always honor your team's time. Now, your ongoing volunteer training may look different than another church's, right? Maybe you do a once a year huge volunteer rally where you bring all the volunteers from across all the ministries of your church together. That's great. Maybe that's a good idea. Maybe it's not. If you're churning out the exact same content year after year, maybe it's not such a great idea, because at some point it's going to become old news. And while it might feel like a refresher, it's actually just kind of insulting at some point. By honoring your team's time, are you doing things for them that they actually should be doing for themselves? Go with me way back to one of the very first churches where I ever served. And in that time, I was a student pastor who one of my responsibilities was to lead what was called the Sunday School Weekly Workers Meeting. Now, those of you who did not grow up in Baptist world and are not as old as I am don't remember the Weekly Workers Meeting. But the Weekly Workers Meeting happened every Wednesday night after the fellowship meal down in the Christian Life Center. You go up to a little musty classroom and you would teach the Sunday school lesson on a Wednesday night to people who were going to teach the Sunday school lesson on a Sunday morning. Now, keep in mind, during this time, I was in my early 20s. I was leading people who were, some of them, 3 times my age. And I look back now on that horrified, thinking about how insulting it was for them to have to listen to this 25-year-old kid teach them how to teach the Bible to a bunch of students on that following Sunday morning. It's like I thought that they were idiots and didn't know what to do, and so I had to teach them how to do it. Well, that's not actually what I thought. That's just the way that our system was built. But that's a good example of not honoring our people's time. Instead of teaching them the lesson that they were going to teach, maybe it would have been better for us to come together and pray for the students that we were going to be teaching. Maybe it would have been better for us to come together and brainstorm how we could more effectively lead our students together. Maybe it would have been more effective to give them new tools in their tool belt for developing their content to teach our students. But I wasn't honoring their time by bringing them out every single Wednesday night to teach them something that they could have very easily figured out how to teach themselves. Number 2, you want to be able to build your ongoing training around task. If your initial training, that onboarding training that I was talking about, is primarily the why with a little bit of the what, then I would say that your ongoing training needs to be a little bit of the why, but primarily on the what. And I'll come back around to that in a moment. See, when we are building things around task, we are talking more in terms of that just-in-time training. Here's something new that's coming that you need to know as a volunteer. Here's a new software check-in process that we're going to be rolling out. Here's something that our church is going to be doing later this fall that we want you to know about first because we view you as a leader in the church. Here's a new policy that we have in place. In all of these things, you're doing the need to grow with your volunteers. You're giving those things just in time to them. You're giving those things to them that will actually be helpful for them in their ministry, and you're building it around tasks. But you don't ever want to divorce that from the why. You always want to keep the vision in front of people. And that brings us to our next point, is that you never want to assume the why. Never assume the why. In your orientation, onboarding, you focused on vision and big picture. Now, anytime that you have an opportunity in front of your volunteers, you need to review. You need to go back to the vision, go back to the vision, go back to the vision. I think about something our pastor always says, is that when I am sick of saying something, our people are just beginning to hear it. And that's so true of so many of us in ministry. So many of us have found ourselves saying something one Sunday morning that was almost a throwaway comment, and a volunteer comes up and says, "I've never heard that before. That's life-changing." And you're like, of course you've heard that before. I've said that all the time. But they had not heard it before for themselves. And so we need to never assume the why, never assume the vision. We need to keep going back to it again and again to make sure our volunteers are hearing it, because about the time we're sick of saying it is about the time that they've just begun to hear it. For all of us, there comes a point where our volunteers seem to just hit a rut, right? There comes a point where they begin to find themselves in trouble, and we know that they're in trouble, and sometimes maybe they know that they're in trouble, maybe they don't know they're in trouble, maybe they're just kind of coasting along and they're not really sure what they're supposed to be doing, and they're not even really sure that they're doing the wrong thing, but you're sure they're doing the wrong thing, and you've got to figure out, how do I fix this as their leader? How do I equip them out of this? Well, there's 4 areas that I think that about 99% of our volunteer troubles always stem from. These are pretty simple. They're going to feel intuitive as we go, right? Number 1 is an area of head. Do they actually know what they're doing? We've talked about training, but I would just ask the question, have you actually trained them? Have you really given them the tools that they need to know what it is that they're supposed to be doing? See, I would imagine if you're like me, you probably have inherited your fair share of volunteers. They were trained by somebody, possibly, or maybe they've never been trained, and you just assume because they've been on the team longer than you have, that they know that the expectation that you have for them, when in effect, you've actually made them switch horses midstream. And in those situations, I think it is more important, before you write that volunteer off as ineffective, that you ask yourself the question honestly, have I actually told them what's expected out of them? Now, if they're a volunteer, again, that you inherited and you've changed horses on them, well, then I think it's fair to sit down and have a very honest conversation and say, I know you didn't sign up for this, but this is really the vision that I think that God has put in front of our team and where we're going, and I would love for you to be a part of it. And I would love to help you take those steps necessary to kind of catch up and do this, because you've been a part of this ministry for so long. I couldn't imagine this ministry without you. But I want you to be able to do the things I'm asking these newer volunteers to do, and I want you to help me lead out in those areas. So head is an important thing. Hands are another thing. I just use that as kind of shorthand for, are they effective at what they're doing? Are they putting their hands to the right areas? Are they in the right fit? Are they on the right team? You see, I lead in guest services. That's my role. But in guest services, that covers a lot of areas. It covers parking, and it covers the first-time guest tent, and it covers the seating area. It covers our next steps area. It covers volunteer headquarters, all of those sort of things. There are people who would be a fantastic fit in the parking lot that would just shrivel and die on a seating team. There are people who would love to serve volunteers behind the scenes in a very closed environment in volunteer headquarters, but they would never want to stand at the front door of the building to welcome hundreds of people in. We've got to ask, are their hands doing what their hands and their head and all those have been designed to do? And then number 3 is a question of heart. Do they actually love what they're doing? Do they see the big picture? I can't tell you over the years the number of people that I've talked to involved in different ministries who got involved in that particular ministry for whatever reason. Maybe it wasn't always the best reason. Maybe they were responding to a need instead of an opportunity. Maybe they were responding out of guilted to instead of get to. But I've always been fascinated by those people who said, I never knew that I could love something as much as I love this. They fell in love with it, and mainly because they saw the big picture behind it. And they were very passionate about it. But here's the thing. We recognize that not everybody is going to have the same passion about the same thing. I don't really want to work in kids ministry. At the current moment, we have 4 grandchildren. We've got more coming on the way, by the way. Keep that between us. But I adore my 4 grandchildren and will take any opportunity to hang out with any one of them just about any time of the day, week, month, or year. I don't necessarily want to hang out with your grandchildren, right? I'm not passionate about your grandkids. I'm passionate about my grandkids. I'm not passionate necessarily about serving in kids ministry in our church. I'm passionate about serving the guests of our church. Passion will always take you farther than just pure white-knuckled commitment. But if you're committed to something, you might be able to be committed to it long enough for your heart to awaken to it. And that'll drive passion, and then passion will drive commitment, and it's this virtuous cycle that continues on. Finally, the last, we talked about head, we talked about hands, we talked about heart. Now let's just talk about soul. Can your volunteers sustain what they are doing? I talked in the first of this 3 breakout series about doing a regular audit of your volunteer team. And I would just say that that is very important for you to know how your volunteers are doing. I believe that it's entirely possible that a lot of times we can spot burnout in a volunteer long before they can. We just see a change in their demeanor, in their life. Maybe that's because of external circumstances, things that are going on at home or at work, but that's still an opportunity for us to step in as a caring shepherd and to say, how are you? How can I help you in the middle of this? How can I come alongside you in the middle of this? Earlier this morning, as I'm shooting this video, I was on a Zoom call with a group of our volunteers from around our congregation. And I knew, at least by name, because some of these attend different campuses, all of these volunteers. I knew by relationship most of these volunteers. But there was one particular person on this call that I knew, but none of the other volunteers on the call knew, that she actually lost her dad last night. This was last night at 6 p.m. She got the call that her dad had passed away. And at 7 o'clock a.m. this morning, she was on this call because she felt like she needed to be. And it was something that actually served as a great distraction for her. She told me later. But I thought about this idea of soul, that in many cases, I might not have even known that that was going on. Certainly none of our other volunteers on the call knew that that was going on because she was keeping a straight face. But the reality is all of our volunteers have things that are going on in their lives, and we've got to pay attention to their soul. We've got to pay attention to what it is that we're asking them to do. We've got to pay attention to the things the areas that we've asked them to serve, and we've got to be ready and willing to step in when we realize that it's time for them to take a break and time for us to serve them instead of them feeling like they have to serve everybody else. See, here's the thing that I've learned over the years of leading volunteers. If they can remember their job description, but they don't remember the gospel, we have utterly failed them. But our volunteers should not serve because they're guilted to, but because they get to. They shouldn't serve because it's something we want from them. It's something that we want for them. And if we get them to serve, manipulate them to serve in some weird way because we let them assume that this is a way that God accepts them or they get to check off that box on their good Christian card or whatever. If they know all the points of their job description, but they don't know the point of the gospel, then they're failing as a Christ-following disciple, and we're failing them as a leader. So yes, we want to equip our volunteers. We want to care for our volunteers. We want to train our volunteers. We want to help our volunteers do all the things that God has for them and lead in all the ways that God wants for them. But at the same time, we want to make sure that in no way and in no season are we ever allowing them to forget that Jesus has already done everything necessary to save them. And there's not one thing that they can do to serve that adds to that salvation. And there's not one thing that they can abdicate in serving that takes away from their salvation. The gospel of Jesus says that the cross did everything for us that is needed. And so we want to lead our volunteers out of that grace-filled overflow to make sure that their head knows exactly what they're doing. Their hands are serving in the right place. Their heart is fully in it, and their soul can bear the weight of the things that we've asked them to do. And leader, I would say that's true for our volunteers, but that's also true for you and for me. We've got to make sure that our soul is not taking on this Superman savior complex, but that we're recognizing that we are people that have feet of clay just like those that we lead. We are people who need the gospel just like those that we lead. We are people who've got to preach the gospel to ourselves just like those that we lead. And if we don't do that, we've got a short shelf life in our own leadership. And so I would just encourage you today, check your own soul as you are caring for the souls of those that you lead.